Michael O'Keefe, and the show is called Michael O'Keefe Goes to the Movies, where I tell you what you should be checking out in Ottawa theaters. So, movies are always playing, but it's also Ramadan right now, and a very holy time of the year for Muslims all across the world. And I've got a very interesting, a very thought-provocative movie that we're going to do an interview about with a producer of the film. The movie's called The Lady of Heaven. It looks at the contemporary world, looks at the ancient world. It's quite fascinating and multi-layered. So I'm going to talk to Malik, a producer of this movie. He's going to break it down for me. But before we do that, let's just check out a trailer for that movie.
The world is in shock as a group of terrorists has taken control of large areas of Syria and Iraq.
The world can be a cruel and dangerous place. Remember, even if you're afraid, be strong. Your loving mother, Fatima.
Did your mother ever tell you the story of the Lady of Heaven? She was very special. Daughter to the Prophet Muhammad.
My time is near. And afterwards, my lovely Fatima, you will face many trials.
With my father no longer here to lead us, evil is with those who will extinguish the light of truth.
You're gonna let a woman tell us what to do. We will burn her out.
God will judge all of you.
This world has become a breeding ground of violence. Shadow will be cast across many generations to come.
It said some people are so full of faith. They give strength to everyone around them.
The greatest thing in this life and the hereafter is the spreading of peace in the world.
Lady Fatima's goodness inspired people to stand up, no matter what the cost. Her legacy lives on.
Hello, Malik Shlibak. There are a lot of things happening in the movie you produced called The Lady of Heaven, but tell my viewers how the movie is set up in the beginning.
Sure. So firstly, thanks for having me. And The Lady of Heaven, it's a very interesting and complex story. Probably not enough time today to really go into it in the depth it requires. People would obviously have to see the film for themselves and then probably do a lot of investigating after, as it does go through a lot of historical narratives. And the film starts off presenting the present time. So what's commonly known about the film is it's a merger between present and historical time. So we look at the present time with a young boy called Laith, who's living during the time of ISIS's reign in Iraq, in the war-torn country of Iraq at that period of time. And he goes through a lot, which obviously I won't be revealing, but he sees ISIS through his eyes, so he sees ISIS, and in the film we build a connection with history. He is adopted by a lady called Bibi, and she expresses to him the history that allows him to kind of come to terms with the world he lives around, that he sees around him. And that history is, of course, pertaining to the Lady of Heaven, Lady Fatima, peace be upon her, the daughter of the Prophet Muhammad. That's kind of the setting stone there. And
Yeah, it's really dense, and the way you tell that part of the story. So tell me about how the movie portrays the prophet, and tell me about his relationship with Fatima.
Sorry, was that the relationship of Fatima with the Prophet?
Yes, and how you portray the prophet in the movie, because that's obviously a controversial thing.
Yeah, sorry. There was just a connection issue, so I'm not fully hearing your questions, but I think it's stabilized. So with the prophet, I mean, yeah. So portraying the prophet, you've heard of something controversy. It's not it's an open secret, of course, but it's not exactly as people understand. Portraying the prophet is something that's been done for centuries by Muslim communities all over the Middle East, the MENA region, um, even in Asia. I mean, you've seen the prophet portrayed in various things like paintings and all sorts. There's just been a sort of trend in the recent modern time where there's been this fad of portraying the prophet being something not permitted, which some groups within Islam do view, but the majority do not. So portraying the prophet, there's no actual real issue with it inherently within the Muslim community. And the technique we took is the digital approach, portraying the prophet through technologies such as facial tracking and digital CGI work, lighting effects, all sorts of wizardry that produces this really beautiful, holy feeling that the prophet deserves. And the feedback we've got from everyone is it's just a wonderful portrayal of the prophet, peace be upon him, and his family. That applies to the other holy characters as well. But you asked me about relationship story. Was that you asking the relationship between the daughter and the Prophet Muhammad, or?
Correct. Yeah, both things. Yeah, it was a two-part
Yeah.
question.
So to go into that, I mean, that's the real heart of the story. To speak about the relationship, I'd have to just touch on the lady first, because the Lady Fatima, is someone who, unfortunately and surprisingly, isn't well known across the globe. She is perhaps known within Muslim communities, but even then, she isn't given the spotlight she deserves. And part of this film, or perhaps the main purpose of this film, is to introduce the lady to the entire world, not just the Muslim community. Actually, the film was initially targeted and set up to be a film for the non-Muslim world rather than for the Muslim world, to introduce this lady. I'm not sure how much you've heard of the lady prior to this film.
Nothing.
That's not a surprise, because that's the common answer I get, and it's really, really a shock. If I was to say to you, would you be able to understand the history and narrative and life of Prophet Jesus, peace be upon him, without knowing about his mother? No one would, I mean, everyone would say, of course not. She's a pivotal figure. She's a holy spiritual figure. She's the Virgin Mary. She is where the story begins. So imagine removing the mother of Jesus from the narrative of the Christian story of Prophet Jesus, peace be upon him. Same thing with Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his family. You can't understand his journey or the narrative of Islam as a whole without understanding the lady, because she was a pivotal character in his life during his prophetic mission. And she was a pivotal figure afterwards as well, after the Prophet's death. She was someone who carried the light of the light of God on earth, as it said in the film. So she's such a pivotal character, and she's, without a shadow of a doubt, the most influential character in Arabian history, and from an Islamic perspective, world history, to be very honest with you. So this is who the lady is, and to discover her, obviously, you have to see the film, and that ties in with your question with the relationship. They had such a tight, wonderful relationship. There's a special scene in the film. I'm not going to reveal the scene, but you'll know the scene when you see it. It's a very holy scene, sort of a private gathering with the Prophet and his family, with the lady, of course, being there. And I can't go into it, but it's such a beautiful scene in the film that shows you the love and connection that the Prophet had with his family as a whole, and especially with the lady, peace be upon her. And you'll know the scene as soon as you see it. But they had such a strong bond, and It's something that really warms the heart when you see it, and that's something portrayed in the film as well. And with the lady, I mean, this is the last point to add. It's not just about, again, any type of emotional bond that they had. It's about who she was as an individual. Whether she was the daughter of the Prophet or not, she would still remain this individual because of what she'd done in her life. She, sacrificed. She literally sacrificed her life and everything she had for the greater good, for all of humanity. And the effects of her sacrifices, her ultimate sacrifices, can be seen today, and that's something that I wouldn't be able to really expand into unless one has seen the film and understood the lady's story. But on a very surface level, because there's the open understanding of the film of this connection between modern day terrorism like ISIS with ancient history, and you see, because Lady Fatima faced the worst of the worst people in her time. It's much more barbaric than what we see today. Today's just a shadow of what Lady Fatima faced, peace be upon her. So we're facing this shadow that remained from her stand, and her stand was able to do so many things in showing us how to deal with these affairs, and also she was able to quell this darkness. So without the lady, God only knows what we'd be facing today, to be very honest with you. But her mission is something that, she stood up and left a message, in essence, and that message has trickled down to us. And it's part of life's journey in terms of what is our duty, what is our purpose as part of this human race to be a part of the solution. And Lady Fatima is that blueprint that Laith learns from. And it's so much more deeper and beautiful than I can go into. Yeah,
I could tell. But and I can see that this is very important to you, and we could go on for a long time about history. I have no doubt about that. But let's get back to the movie. Tell me about the locations. Where did you shoot this movie? And talk to me about creating those historical sets.
Sorry, that last part you said?
Tell me about creating those historical sets.
Oh, yes. Okay. So the film majority was shot in Georgia, in Europe, and and parts shot in London also. So I didn't fly out to the set. My colleagues, obviously the producer himself. So I'm obviously one of the executive producers. You have the main producer Matthew. You have the creative consultant John Stevenson, and you have my colleagues that were over there, Mehdi Husseini, Hussein Ashmir, Jawad Saleh, who are other executive producers. So they went over there to deal with the shooting in Georgia. It was difficult. I was involved, but I wasn't on the set. But it was a very challenging experience because we had to deal with obviously multiple things at the same time. Things in London, things in Georgia, flying things over. We need camels. We need different things for the set. We need different types of vehicles and all sorts of things are needed. So it's all happening, at the same time. And Matthew Cooper's with his wizardry is able to coordinate all of that as required. And then the set itself, this is a magnificent part. And this is something that will be revealed in the making of documentary that should come past the launch phase. Yeah, it's something that's planned from early days. This making of documentary, it will show you all sort of nitty-gritty details of what happened. But the building of the set was a huge challenge. So they rebuilt the ancient city of Medina, which is one of the holy cities, and very important during the time of the Prophet and the Lady Fatima, peace be upon them. And then obviously parts of Mecca as well. You got the Kaaba, the iconic Kaaba, but in how it was in the ancient times. And it's a real set. Yeah, they actually built it. They got a crew. They got very talented people, extremely talented people to build these sets. And this is the thing to keep in mind. You have a talented team that actually built the set, as well as other teams building the costumes, things like pottery, vases, whatever things people may be using in the streets, all sorts of things that were in that time used to make the set appear to be natural. And the thing is, that's one side of it. The other side is the actual research. One of the things that I've said quite a few times in public is that this film is, I would argue, and very confidently, the most accurate, historically accurate cinematic production ever made in the history of mankind. I mean, we spent over a year pre-production, formalizing our research, and obviously with His Eminence Sheikh Al Habib, who is the writer of the film, and also the historian of who's 'cause he's got a wealth of knowledge and experience in this field. He was able to guide us through, and we're talking about going through massive amounts of historical texts and documents and manuscripts, gathering every minute detail you can imagine in terms of how that period of time was, from the city to the attire, what people are wearing, their houses, and the interiors, the exteriors, the markets, as I said, the pottery, the weaponry, even down to how people looked. So this is something quite interesting. For example, if we look at the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, this applies to all the major characters, but if you take the Prophet as an example, there are, and something people don't know, there are a lot of historical texts depicting how he looks, telling us about his facial features, the shape of his face and head, and even down to how many grey beards he had at a certain time in his life. Yeah, how many grey hairs in his beard? Sorry, how many grey beards? But how many grey hairs in his beard he had? So it was a very detailed process and very historically accurate. And we stood by this from the beginning to the end of the production, that we are not going to play with the history in any way for the sake of cinema. This is one of the biggest challenges actually that we had, because you have to, in all historical films, they have the history and then they have cinema, and then they kind of merge the two. And history usually is warped to fit cinema. But we set these boundaries from the very start. We're going to be sticking to the history, and then trying to make it work in cinema, but without adapting anything in terms of accuracy. So that's one of the unique aspects of the film.
Tell me about some of the cinematic influences, though. Like there's a big fight scene. I don't want to. There are a couple of action pieces, and I got sort of a Ridley Scott vibe. Like I was thinking about movies like The Last Duel recently, or Gladiator. Were there any conscious cinematic influences that you want to touch upon? What might this movie remind some people of, despite its uniqueness?
I mean, Gladiator is an interesting one that you brought forth. I can't say if that was a specific direct influence, but for me personally, that's obviously a film that just it influences you in many ways, just how powerful it was. And I can see the link there because, again, without going into too much detail, you have the heroic figure of Imam Ali, Lady Fatima's husband, who's also another holy personality, and he's an important feature of the film. And he is that real heroic warrior like character, but he's also, as you know, he's got as you may know or may not know, he's got that gentle side to him as well. He's that sort of warrior and farmer kind of fusion. He's very humble, but also very valiant and heroic. So you have that sort of gladiator type feeling, definitely. But in terms of specific influences, I think the two biggest ones, perhaps first and foremost, would be The Passion of the Christ. You'd see this quote quite a lot about the film. It's interesting, this was our direct influence, but also others made this linkage themselves, because it's just, I mean, obviously it has the religious connection as well with Prophet Jesus and Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon them both. So there's that religious theme, but also in terms of the underlying feeling that you take away from the film, that, you know, in Passion of Christ, there's a lot of brutality that leads to very deep sorrow. Passion of Christ is famous for people walking away in tears, and you get that with the Lady of Heaven as well. There's a very sorrowful. There's a lot of brutality faced by many, and primarily by the lady herself, and then followed by, you know, immense sadness. But our film also has you could say a silver lining in terms of this message of hope and victory over darkness or over evil. So definitely Passion of Christ. And then the second one would be 300. 300 minutes. Yeah.
I didn't expect that one.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one because the 300 is obviously known for, I don't know if quirky is the right word, but it definitely has its own unique flavor,
Right.
abstract, artistic, you know, however you want to put it. They took a very unique approach to how things look graphically, and then also their battle scenes. You recall that they use a lot of slow motion with a lot of these, you know, blood, you know, 3D rendered blood flying across the sky and all sorts of things. So we wanted to have some type of artistic, unique feeling that, you know, entices you in that regard. So you'll see some similarities. Obviously, we don't want to just copy or clone any other type of film. We want to have our own feeling, but you'll notice inspirations there because, you know, we do have, you know, in the battle scene again, which I won't talk too much about. We have a lot of these interesting and highly creative and complex aspects to spice that battle scene up. And I'll leave it there. Yeah.
Cool. So, how many? I know you said you weren't on the set, but how many people would be working on this movie, crew-wise, on a given day? And do you think there was an MVP of the crew?
Oh goodness, yeah. I would not be able to give you a number. I wouldn't be able to give you a number because I don't think. I mean, unless you go to someone specifically, like maybe Matthew or the finance. I mean, if you're working this project, it's just such an overwhelming thing. You have so many departments that come and go in different phases. Sorry, I have my clock here. You have so many different departments from during pre-production, even pre-production. People think like it's just us working. In pre-production, you have various different people involved as well to even enter into production. Then you have the production stage, then post-production. Then, you know, obviously you work going into marketing and distribution, and then each of these phases have different layers, and a lot of times, you know, it could be someone coming in for a day, a week, someone's working for a month, someone for the whole production. It's such a complex thing, you know, and I think this is something that people don't realize unless you've worked in it, in this specific field, and certainly I didn't until I was involved here. And it's just so much more complex than you can imagine. And this is one thing I take away, and I'd say this to Matthew Coopers, who's the producer, is I don't have any pity for, or not I don't have any pity, I have a lot of pity for producers in the film industry, because it's something, the only word that comes to mind is insane. And I say that not in a negative way, I say that in an appreciative way at the same time. I really appreciate the work that producers like Matthew Coopers and other producers are able to do. It's just such a complex thing. But in terms of MVP, that might upset some people, but I can't pinpoint one MVP. I'll just have to obviously put in, as I said, Matthew Coopers, John, the creative consultant, John Stevenson, who he's a brilliant creative talent. He, if you know John, he was the CEO of the creature factory for Jim Henson.
Wow.
The creator of the Muppets and all sorts of things. So he's a brilliant creative mind that was able to bring the vision to life in the film. When you watch the film, you'll get this sense of etherealness in the shots and in the setup and in just the direction. And that's the work of John Stephenson, the creative consultant. And then, I mean, I can list so many names. Obviously, the other executive producers I mentioned earlier. This whole project would not be possible without His Eminence Sheriff Habib, who perhaps, if anyone, has to be put as maybe the number one MVP, because he's the writer of this story. It's his vision. It's his life work. To be very honest with you, this field and the lady herself. I mean, his entire life he's been diving into this area, and I mean, he's obviously an academic and an educator and a spiritual leader, and he's someone who's quite important to me, of course, and he's actually someone I discovered the lady through him, actually, in terms of understanding. I mean, I knew of the lady prior, but in discovering her, who she really was and what she really stood for, I discovered it through him. So this is an extension of his life's work in terms of getting this message and introducing the lady as the lady to the world. So I think that maybe could be classed as MVP. And there's a lot of names that I haven't mentioned, and I do apologize if they see this. And I mean, I'll have to just throw in Jane Owen as well, who's been superb in helping us with so many things in the marketing field and other fields. And maybe we can add the rest of the names as the credits after.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
that's yeah.
All right. Well, Malik, thank you very much for your time. I really enjoyed your movie, The Lady of Heaven, which people in the Ottawa area can check out very soon in the Cineplexes. So are you excited for the theatrical release of the movie before I let you go?
Yeah, super excited. Super excited. I mean, we've experienced the USA theatrical release, and we're now going into other regions. Just recently now, Ireland. We have a theatrical distribution in Ireland, as well as Canada, and pushing for other regions as well. And soon enough, beyond that, I mean, as many regions as possible. And then beyond that, VOD, that's when I guess a wider audience will be able to access it. Because it's a film you're going to watch more than once. Definitely going to watch it more than once. So that's when VOD comes in, and you can just really dive into that film. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a nice day, sir.
Well, that does it for Michael O'Keefe Goes to the Movies. Thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it. Make sure you check out The Lady of Heaven, and I'll see you next time on Michael O'Keefe Goes to the Movies.